Welcome back to True Crime Chronicles, where we dive into the darkest corners of human nature. Today, we won't just be telling a story, we'll be uncovering a chain of events that carved fear and horror deep into the heart of a nation. About a killer who spread terror and pushed the boundaries of justice itself. Before we embark on this haunting journey, I have a small request. If you enjoy the profound and gripping stories we bring you, please hit the subscribe button right now so you won't miss any future episodes. Your support is a tremendous motivation for us to continue delivering the highest quality content. Alright, take a deep breath. We're about to step into a story that will stay with you long after it ends. Turn off the lights, turn up the speakers, and join me as we uncover the tale of the Night Weaver, a name that became a living nightmare in America. The city of Portland, Oregon, known for its vibrant art scene, progressive spirit, and an ever-present scent of rain and coffee, was abruptly shaken awake in the late autumn of 2008. The first tremor came on a Monday morning, a day meant for fresh starts and renewed purpose, but instead, it marked the beginning of an era of profound unease. The victim was Sarah Jenkins, a 24-year-old aspiring street artist, found in her modest apartment in the Hawthorne district. Her body was discovered by her landlord, who, after a few unanswered calls about overdue rent, used a spare key to check in. What he found would forever alter the perception of safety in this usually serene Pacific Northwest haven. Sarah was meticulously arranged on her studio floor, amidst spilled paint and unfinished canvases. There was no sign of forced entry, no struggle, no robbery. Her hands were bound with a complex series of knots, fashioned from what appeared to be silk threads, forming an intricate, almost artistic pattern. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, stared at a single peculiar object left on her chest. A small, intricately carved wooden bird, no larger than a thumb, seemingly made from dark, polished wood. Its wings were outstretched as if in mid-flight, and its craftsmanship was unerringly precise. Detectives Amelia Vance and Ben Carter were assigned the case. Vance, a veteran of 2 decades with the Portland Police Bureau, was known for her quiet intensity and an almost intuitive understanding of human nature. Carter, her younger partner, was a sharp, tech-savvy detective whose analytical mind complemented Vance's experience. From the moment they stepped into Sarah's apartment, a chilling sense of calculated precision hung in the air. This wasn't a crime of passion or convenience. It felt like a statement. "No signs of a break-in," Carter murmured, his gaze sweeping the room, taking in the bohemian chaos that was Sarah's life. She must have known him or let him in. Vance knelt beside the body, her eyes fixed on the bizarre ligature marks and the wooden bird. "This isn't just about killing Ben. This is about presentation. Look at these knots. Someone put a lot of effort into this. And the bird. It's a signature, clear as day." The lack of forensic evidence beyond the immediate scene was also unsettling. No fingerprints, no trace DNA, nothing concrete to suggest who had been there. The killer was meticulous, almost surgical in their execution and cleanup. The initial news reports were cautious, referring to it as an isolated incident, perhaps a domestic dispute gone wrong. But Vance had a gut feeling, a cold dread that gnawed at her, telling her this was far from isolated. 2 weeks later, her fears were tragically confirmed. The second victim, 30-year-old Mikey Chong, a talented but struggling musician who often buskied near Pioneer Courthouse Square, was found in his sparsely furnished apartment in the Pearl District. The scene mirrored Sarah's almost exactly. No forced entry, the same intricate silk knots binding his wrists and ankles, and the chillingly identical wooden bird resting on his chest. This time, however, the knots were slightly different, a variation on the original pattern, as if the killer was refining their art. Mikey's apartment, like Sarah's, was devoid of any significant forensic clues. The media frenzy began to ignite. 2 similar murders, distinct MO, an unsettling signature object, the city was beginning to whisper. Local news channels ran continuous segments, speculating about a serial killer. The term "the Silk Knot Killer" began to circulate, but it didn't quite capture the eerie precision of the wooden bird. Vance and Carter found themselves working around the clock. They interviewed Sarah and Mikey's friends, family, and acquaintances, delving into their lives for any hidden connection. Sarah was a free spirit, often sketching in public parks, occasionally selling her art on the street. Mikey lived for his music, playing guitar for spare change, dreaming of his big break. On the surface, they seemed completely unrelated. One an artist, the other a musician, both creative, both living on the fringes of financial stability, but that was a common trait in Portland. "We're looking for a needle in a haystack, boss," Carter sighed one late night, staring at the growing corkboard filled with victim profiles, maps, and crime scene photos. What connects them? They weren't wealthy targets. No obvious enemies. They both lived somewhat transient lives. But in a city like Portland, that's half the population. Vance traced a finger along the wooden bird in a zoomed-in photo. "It's the bird, Ben. And the knots. These aren't random. This is someone with a very specific skill set and an even more specific message." She hypothesized that the killer wasn't just killing, but weaving a narrative, a pattern that they were yet to discern. The meticulousness suggested intelligence, patience, and a chilling control. The city's vibrant atmosphere began to curdle into fear. People were less likely to walk alone at night, doors were double-locked, and a palpable tension hung in the air. The police department faced immense pressure from the mayor's office and a terrified public. Vance and Carter were at the forefront of a task force that was growing, yet no significant leads emerged. They consulted with FBI profilers, who described the killer as likely highly organized, a loner, intelligent, and driven by a complex psychological motive, possibly with a narcissistic need for control and recognition. The profilers suggested the killer saw themselves as an artist or a craftsman, and their victims as elements in a larger, morbid creation. Then came the third victim 3 weeks after Mikey. Emily Harding, a barista who moonlighted as a poet, was found in her small apartment in Selwood. Again, the chilling tableau. No forced entry, the silk knots, and the wooden bird. This time, the knots were even more elaborate, almost a miniature macrame. The wooden bird, too, had a slight variation, a tiny, almost imperceptible feather carved into its wing, making it even more unique. The media, no longer holding back, christened the perpetrator the Midnight Weaver. The name stuck, painting a vivid, terrifying image of a silent, shadowy figure who moved through the night, leaving behind a trail of intricate death. Vance stared at the new crime scene photos, her jaw tight. "He's getting bolder, Ben. More confident. Each one is a step up. A refinement." Carter zoomed in on the bird. "This feather. So tiny. How could anyone carve something like that?" "Someone with incredible precision, patience, and a steady hand," Vance replied, her voice barely a whisper. "Someone who sees this as their magnum opus." The city was gripped by full-blown panic. Nightlife dwindled, streets emptied earlier, and a collective dread settled over Portland. The police were no closer to identifying their killer, only able to connect the increasingly elaborate signature and the growing body count. Detective Vance felt the weight of the city's fear pressing down on her, knowing that the Midnight Weaver was still out there, meticulously crafting their next thread, preparing their next grim tableau. Months blurred into a relentless, exhausting cycle for Detective Vance and her team. The Midnight Weaver continued his macabre work, claiming 4 more victims over the winter and spring of 2009. Each new discovery amplified the city's terror and deepened the task force's desperation. The victims, a freelance graphic designer, a struggling playwright, a pottery artist, and a street photographer, further solidified the pattern. Creative individuals, often on the periphery of conventional success, living lives that, while vibrant, were also somewhat isolated. The consistent elements remained. No forced entry, the unique silk ligatures, each more intricate than the last, and the haunting wooden bird, subtly evolving with each new victim, sometimes with a different type of wood, sometimes with a new, minuscule detail. The pressure on Vance and Carter was immense. The media had turned from reporting to outright demanding answers. The mayor's office was breathing down their necks, and the FBI's presence in Portland had expanded significantly. Profilers, behavioral analysts, and forensic experts offered theories, but no solid leads. The Midnight Weaver was a ghost, leaving behind only his chilling art and a profound lack of physical evidence. "There has to be something, Ben," Vance muttered one grim morning, staring at a massive digital map of Portland, dotted with the 7 crime scenes. They spanned different districts, from the artistic enclaves of Southeast to the more industrial North, and the bustling downtown core. There was no obvious geographical pattern to the locations of the apartments. They're so disparate, yet so connected by the MO and the victims' profiles. It's like he's deliberately scattering them to throw us off. Carter, his eyes bloodshot from endless nights poring over databases, pointed to a subtle anomaly. What if it's not where they live or where they work, but where they were? Like, a specific place they might have visited, or an event they attended. He had been cross-referencing every detail from the victims' social media, old emails, and even their public library records. It was a long shot, but they were running out of options. Their initial theory that the victims were forgotten or isolated was evolving. These individuals, while not conventionally successful, were deeply engaged in their respective creative communities. They had friends, shared their work, and frequented specific local spots. Carter had started looking for the uncommon commonalities, the things that might not immediately stand out. Days later, a breakthrough, small but significant, emerged from Carter's tireless work. He had noticed a peculiar recurring element in the digital footprint of 3 of the victims. Brief, almost throwaway mentions, or even just geotagged photos of an abandoned industrial complex on the eastern bank of the Willamette River. It was a derelict, sprawling former textile mill, shut down decades ago, now a decaying monument to Portland's industrial past. It was a magnet for urban explorers, graffiti artists, and thrill-seekers, exactly the kind of place creative, slightly rebellious individuals might frequent. "The Hawthorne Mill," Carter announced, pointing to a cluster of pins on his digital map. Sarah Jenkins posted a photo of some graffiti there 2 years ago. Mikey Chang's last known phone ping before he disappeared was near there. Emily Harding was part of an urban photography group that did a shoot there last summer. And 2 other victims, the graphic designer and the street photographer, both had photos of the mill on their Flickr accounts. Vance felt a jolt of adrenaline. A common hunting ground. He's not just picking them at random, Ben. He's selecting them from a specific pool, a place where he can observe them, maybe even interact with them under a different guise. The mill became their new focal point. The building was immense, a labyrinth of decaying machinery, dark corridors, and vast, empty spaces. It had become an unofficial canvas for street artists and a haunt for the city's counterculture. If the Midnight Weaver was operating from here or targeting people who frequented it, then the mill itself could hold secrets. Vance and Carter, along with a specialized tactical unit, began to meticulously search the abandoned mill. The air was thick with the smell of damp concrete and decay. They found evidence of extensive urban exploration, hidden art installations, and makeshift shelters, but nothing directly linking to the Midnight Weaver. As they combed through the sprawling complex, Vance kept thinking about the wooden birds, the meticulous craftsmanship, the subtle evolution. It hinted at a deep personal connection, almost an obsession, with the act of creation itself. The killer wasn't just doing something. They were making something. Meanwhile, the Midnight Weaver seemed to be aware of the heightened police activity around the mill. For a tense 3 weeks, there were no new victims. The city held its breath, hoping the killer had fled or been deterred. Vance, however, knew better. This was a predator, not a coward. He was likely observing, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again, perhaps even closer to their search area, as if to taunt them. Her premonition proved tragically correct. The 8th victim, a local journalist named Derek Olson, who had written several scathing articles about the police's failure to capture the Midnight Weaver, was found in his home, just a few blocks from the mill. This was a calculated escalation. Derek was not an artist, but a public critic. The knots were the most elaborate yet, almost like a miniature tapestry, and the wooden bird had a tiny, carved microphone clutched in its beak. This was no longer just about the art. It was about control, about silencing dissent, about the killer asserting his dominance over the narrative. He's sending a message directly to us. Amelia, Carter said, his voice grim, looking at the crime scene photos. To me, to you, to the entire department. He's telling us he's untouchable, and he's watching. Vance stared at the photo of the tiny microphone on the bird. The boldness, the audacity, the sheer contempt for their efforts. It fueled a cold fury within her. He's making it personal now, and that's where he'll make his mistake, Ben. He thinks he's above us, but every detail, every knot, every bird, is a piece of himself he's leaving behind. And we're going to use them to weave his own trap. The clues, though sparse, were starting to point towards a very specific profile. Someone with an intimate knowledge of textiles and knot tying, exceptional woodworking skills, an understanding of Portland's underground art scene, and a profound, perhaps narcissistic, need for control and recognition. The killer saw himself as a grand artist, and the city was his canvas. The hunt for the Midnight Weaver had intensified into a desperate, personal vendetta for Detective Vance, who felt the city's hopes slowly unraveling with each new victim. The tangled weave of clues was tightening, but the identity of the Weaver remained shrouded in shadow, watching from the periphery, his next move a terrifying mystery. The murder of Derek Olson, the journalist, marked a critical turning point. The Midnight Weaver had not only grown bolder but had directly challenged the authorities, signaling a shift from abstract artistic statement to pointed defiance. This fueled Detective Vance's determination, transforming the investigation into an intensely personal pursuit. Carter, using the new geographical data and the subtle changes in the wooden birds, had developed a sophisticated mapping algorithm. Each bird, with its unique wood and minute details, suggested a specific origin or a skilled craftsman. The woods ranged from local maple and fir to exotic ebony and rosewood, hinting at access to specialized material, or even a hidden workshop. After weeks of relentless cross-referencing, mapping, and a deep dive into artisanal woodworking and textile communities, Carter's algorithm flagged a peculiar outlier, a man named Elias Thorne. Thorne was a reclusive, 52-year-old former architect whose promising career had ended abruptly after a controversial public art installation proposal was rejected years prior, humiliating him and leading to his retreat from public life. He lived in a small, meticulously kept house not far from the Hawthorne Mill, owned a significant collection of exotic woods, and was known in niche online forums for his exceptional, almost obsessive skill in intricate wood carving and knot tying for decorative purposes. More chillingly, his online persona, though mostly anonymous, sometimes expressed bitter resentment towards the superficiality of Portland's art scene and the forgotten beauty of industrial decay. Thorne's proposal, the one that got rejected, Carter explained, pointing to old newspaper clippings. It was for a massive textile-inspired sculpture, planned to be built right at the entrance of the Hawthorne Mill, transforming the abandoned space into a monument to lost craftsmanship. He believed the city had forgotten its industrial roots and its appreciation for true artisanal skill. He called his proposed artwork the Grand Weave. Vance felt a cold chill run down her spine. The Grand Weave, the Midnight Weaver, is too close to be a coincidence. The textile knots, the wood carvings, and the resentment. He feels overlooked, forgotten, just like his victims, but in a twisted way. He's projecting his own pain onto them. They learned Thorne had meticulously documented his passion for intricate knots and wood carving online, sometimes posting photos of his tiny, detailed wooden birds, often using exotic woods. He was exceptionally skilled, almost to the point of obsession. His apartment, according to a recent property tax assessment, had a custom-built, soundproofed workshop in the basement. The pieces clicked into place, forming a terrifyingly coherent picture. Elias Thorne, a disillusioned artist, rejected by a city he felt had lost its way, had taken his twisted sense of justice and his meticulous craft to the extreme. He wasn't just killing. He was weaving a narrative of his own, using the bodies of those he perceived as part of the superficial art scene, or those who, like the journalist, dared to criticize, as threads in his morbid tapestry. The wooden birds were his signature, his personal mark, a twisted legacy of the art he believed the world had denied him. A tactical team was assembled and a warrant issued. The apprehension had to be precise, as Thorne was clearly intelligent and meticulous. Vance and Carter led the team to Thorne's house. It was unassuming from the outside, but Vance could feel the dark energy emanating from it. As they breached the front door, the house was eerily silent. It was impeccably clean, almost sterile, filled with minimalist furniture and a surprising collection of antique looms and intricate tapestries. There was an air of meticulous order that betrayed the chaos brewing within its owner. They found Elias Thorne in his basement workshop, a space that was both a craftsman's paradise and a macabre museum. The air was thick with the scent of sawdust and linseed oil. Tools of various shapes and sizes lined the walls, each perfectly placed. On his workbench, bathed in the soft glow of a desk lamp, was a half-finished wooden bird, identical in style to those found at the crime scenes. Only this one was crafted from a dark, almost black exotic wood. Beside it lay spools of different colored silk thread, some of them still tied into test knots, eerily similar to the ligatures. Thorne did not resist. He was a quiet, unassuming man with intense, almost unervingly calm eyes. He stood by his workbench, not a hint of panic or surprise on his face, as if he had been expecting them, or perhaps, waiting for them to finally appreciate his art. "It's about the patterns, isn't it, Detective Vance?" Thorne spoke, his voice soft, almost conversational, lacking any discernible emotion. "The beauty in the threads, the order in the chaos. This city, it forgets. It discards beauty for fleeting trends. My work is a reminder, a reclamation." Vance looked around the workshop, seeing the chilling extent of his obsession. There were dozens, perhaps hundreds, of completed wooden birds, displayed on shelves like trophies, each subtly different, each representing a life taken. She saw sketches of different knot patterns, some incredibly complex, meticulously drawn. "You took lives, Mr. Thorne," Vance said, her voice steady, despite the surge of revulsion she felt. "You didn't reclaim anything. You destroyed it." Thorne merely smiled, a faint, unsettling gesture that didn't reach his eyes. "They were merely threads, Detective. Imperfect. I brought order. I wove them into something permanent, something beautiful, something to be remembered." The city of Portland breathed a collective sigh of relief as news of the Midnight Weaver's capture spread. The reign of terror had ended. Elias Thorne was convicted of multiple counts of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. Yet the trauma lingered. The memory of the silent, meticulous killer and his haunting wooden birds remained etched into the city's consciousness. For Detective Vance, the case left an indelible mark. She had stared into the heart of a man who saw himself as an artist, a creator, while committing unspeakable acts of destruction. She understood that evil often wore a mask of reason, twisted by resentment and a desperate need for recognition. The Midnight Weaver case became a grim reminder that darkness could lurk in the most unexpected corners, and that the threads of human experience, though beautiful, could sometimes be woven into patterns of unimaginable horror. Vance continued her work, forever changed, knowing that while one monster was caged, the shadows of the human psyche would always find new ways to weave their unsettling tales. The wooden birds, now locked away in evidence, served as a chilling testament to a killer's twisted art, a silent chronicle of terror that would echo for years to come.